Let's take a look at how we can make perfect holes inside our speaker boxes. This doesn't require a ton of skill, it just requires the right know-how and the proper tools. Clearly it doesn't need the skill if I can do it. The tools I'm going to use in this video to get these perfect circles is a drill, an 1/8" drill bit. You'll need a router circle jig. I'll leave a link to the exact one that I'm using and an optional one that's a whole heck of a lot less money. And you'll need a router with this bit. Links to everything down below. Oh, I almost forgot, you'll need a punch and a hammer as well. You should begin by marking every single one of your hole locations. Make sure you have a punch and a hammer, and you'll try to get as close to that bullseye as possible. This will help that drill bit guide its way right through exactly in the right location and not wander on top of the surface. Do the same for all the holes in your speaker box. Mark them all, punch them all. 1/8" drill bit is exactly the right size for the circle jig that I'm using for my router. Now this is an optional step, but I do feel you get a better result, especially when it comes to doing the recess, not so much for making the initial circle. The jig that I've got here is from Woodhaven. Now this one did come with a pencil marking jig. This lets me quickly drop in a pencil and mark out all of my circle diameters that I'm going to use for reference when I'm routing these things. Now if you're cutting an outside diameter circle, you can just take this and make sure you put this on some kind of a scrap piece of lumber, scrap piece of wood, because you will need to set the router bit depth deep enough that it's going to go all the way through, but you don't want it to dance or go through and hit anything on the bottom side. Start erring to the side of caution. Either if it's an outside diameter like I'm cutting here, go a little bit bigger and kind of give it a little bit of a test with just a very shallow depth before you go deeper and commit. Now in the case of this speaker box, I did need to laminate another piece on the back, so I'm going to take those screws out, and I'm not just going to take them out and leave it like that. Make sure you give this surface a sand. You want this smooth so that your router bit or that router circle jig is not going to hook onto anything on the surface and cause these irregularities. So there's kind of two ways to do this to cut the circle initially out. One is two-sided tape and the other is by screwing the board right onto the surface. I tried the two-sided tape and it's not the fault of the tape, but the fault of me being able to get this thing totally down to get this thing to adhere. I would recommend just screwing it to whatever scrap piece of lumber you have behind. That ensures this thing is not going to move. Make sure you have it marked out in some way, shape, or form that you get this piece of wood right back into the exact location to do any routing adjustments. Now what I typically like to do when I start this is I really like to err to the side of caution. I put that blade on the router just barely where it's skimming the surface, and this lets me really take the time to kind of dial that circle right into where I want it, and then I can do just a little quarter radius, and you can see it lines up perfectly with my pencil marks doing it this way. Then once I have it set, then I can go deeper and I can commit. This thing stayed in place exactly for the remainder of my routing. That being said, going forward, I'm going to totally be using screws instead of double-sided tape. The double-sided tape I do believe has its purpose, and that's for templates. I think that's the place to go. If you can, just put in a screw to secure to your backplate or 2 screws. You're going to be way better off with that. This thing will not move at that point. Now once you have your first hole cut out that lets the speaker kind of drop in, this is why that other pencil line is important. Now you can shift your speaker around. You can really take a look at it and see kind of where it lines up with that pencil hole. Not only do we have a measurement now, but we also have a visualization of if the speaker driver is out by a small fraction of a millimeter to our diameter that we've got on our spec sheet. We can now fine tune that and get this hole cut exactly the size of that driver to recess it completely the way we want. Now this is probably about the most important part of this, is getting that piece right back in exactly that location so you can route these holes out. Now the other thing I'm going to do is measure the depth of my router bit, and I'm going to set it based on the caliper measurement of the thickness of the speaker, not on the spec sheet. This way that recess is going to be fit exactly to the driver and not to the spec sheet. Once I have it right with a caliper measurement, I can go ahead and I can make that circle diameter and start small and then slowly enlarge it till it's exactly a snug fit with your driver. Now you don't have to do anything fancy to get these speaker plates to sit exactly in the spot where you can route them consistently and fit them and put them back. If you want to know how to do that, I'll leave a link off to the side as soon as that video is done.